I don't know if this sub is the most suitable place for this post, but I don't know what to do, so I'm just hoping to vent and hope for advice. My encounter with this individual, who I'll call Ben, began in November 2024 in school. He was a friend of one of my friends, Tom, and eventually we became part of the same friend group. I have always found Ben a bit creepy, which seemed to be the school's population's general view towards him. However, once we became regularly socializing, I began to feel bad for my presumptions. That was until we were added to the WhatsApp group. That's when things started to turn. First, it was the mindless constant images of gore he would send, involving torture victims and murdered children. I don't know if these images were real, but they made me really uncomfortable, to the point I asked him to stop, which I was told to take a joke and stop being a pussy. This was followed by messages where he stated he had killed a cat, along with sick fantasies involving people I knew. I wasn't sure if Ben was just the average edgelord, which was the other friend's attitude, but something didn't seem right. Then one Saturday, I was alone Christmas shopping in town when I noticed Ben standing on the road from me, just staring directly at me. I waved at him awkwardly, to which he just stared before walking casually down a side street. For the rest of the trip, every time I turned, Ben was standing there just staring at me at a distance. I eventually just gave up shopping and went home, pissed. I texted him about it, to which he just stated that he didn't know what I was talking about. Then in school on lunch, Ben and another friend, Jack, convinced me to come with him to the forest behind the school, along with another friend named Zach. Stupid, I know, but I was bored and accompanied. Anyway, we start getting deeper in, and Ben was becoming weird. He was laughing and kept repeating, "Closer, closer." Eventually, both me and Zach agreed that it was creepy and off-putting, and we returned back to school. Ben seemed pissed when he and Jack returned. However, when we asked why they wanted us to go further, he responded, he wanted to set fire and show us. After this, I distanced myself and left the group chat, though eventually was re-added. While on my hiatus from the group, Ben attacked Tom with a homemade blade. I believe it was a razor from a sharpener. He attacked him in school, resulting with a wound near the wrist. This resulted in Ben being expelled from school. However, no legal actions were taken. It's now been a month and I was re-added to the group chat to find that Ben had been sending graphic self-harm photos and talking about his hatred towards his family, blaming them for his misfortune. I'm worried he generally gives off killer vibes, but perhaps I'm just being paranoid. I often wonder about that time in the forest and in the town plaza. Should I be concerned or am I overreacting? I sometimes worry that Ben knows where I live and isn't far away. This happened over 10 years ago, but I still think about how close I came to dying. I was already with my future husband when I met his cousin. We had a lot in common. We both struggled with addiction and anorexia. We'd talk on the phone and meet up to eat and see a movie, but he kissed me in the car, so I decided it would be best if we stopped talking. I told my future husband about the kiss, and he was understanding. I didn't tell him that his cousin got extremely upset over me turning him down. Some time passed, and we started meeting up as friends. Since we were both starving ourselves, we always went to the same places, but after a couple times, I felt like it wasn't healthy for either of us to meet up. He asked me to meet up with him one last time, and I stupidly said yes. We went to our place, and during dinner he was talking about his apartment and job, how happy he could make me. I got uncomfortable, and I asked him to drive me home. It wasn't really late, and instead of driving me home, he drove me to a forest preserve. It was pitch black because all the lights were off. I immediately felt uneasy. We were alone in the parking lot, and I had a horrible feeling at this point that something was going to happen. He parked and turned off the car and looked at me and said that we were meant for each other. I didn't want to upset him, so I just said that he knew I was engaged and that we were just friends. He had a history of violence, so I was terrified. He started getting really upset and almost crying, saying that he loved me. Then he put his arm around my neck and held his arm really hard down the right side of my neck, and I've been looking straight ahead when I suddenly woke up to the police officer at my window. He was asking if I was okay. I was really scared and confused. I had some vomit on my shirt and I wet my pants. He had pressed down on my carotid artery for long enough to knock me out. He was a wrestler in high school. He was telling the officer we were fine and that I was drunk. He got a ticket, but I was too afraid to say anything because if he was arrested, my now husband's family would have blamed me for it. Or at least that's what I thought. I said I was fine, but I wanted to go home now. I thought if I said that in front of the officer, he would drive me home because he took our names and he wouldn't risk trying to do something else. So he drove me home and didn't say anything. I don't know if he was trying to kill me or just got upset and went overboard. Regardless, he did almost kill me, and it really fucked me up. A person does not vomit and wet themselves after neck compressions unless they almost died. I told my now husband, but not right away, because I felt like it was partly my fault for meeting up with him. I only saw him a couple more times at holidays, and then he stopped coming, but he didn't dare speak to me after what he did. If that officer hadn't shown up, I don't know if I would still be here. It started like any other friendship. I met Ben in my freshman year of high school. He was quiet, often keeping to himself, but he seemed harmless enough. At first, he was a little shy, always hanging around the edges of the group, but over time he grew on me and we started hanging out more. I thought we had a solid friendship until things began to shift. It began with little things. He would send me long, cryptic messages late at night talking about things that felt off. At first, I thought it was just his way of being edgy. Ben had this strange fascination with darker subjects, death, horror movies, and violent video games. But it wasn't the usual teenage rebellion. It was something deeper, something that made my skin crawl. One night, Ben texted me something that didn't sit right. It was a picture, a dead animal, its body twisted in unnatural ways. "I did this," the message said. I was shocked. He's always been into some pretty grim stuff, but this felt different. I tried to brush it off, thinking it might be a prank. I told him to never send anything like that again, but Ben's behavior started escalating. He'd show up unexpectedly, standing outside my house for hours, staring at my windows. When I confronted him, he would just shrug it off, saying he was just thinking or needed some fresh air. I started to avoid him, but every time I turned around, there he was, watching me from a distance. Then, one Saturday afternoon, things took a darker turn. I was walking through the local park, my headphones in, when I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I looked up and saw Ben standing there at the far end of the park, just staring at me. His eyes were cold, distant, like he was studying me. I waved, trying to brush it off, but he didn't wave back. He just stood there, unmoving. My heart started racing. I turned to leave, but when I was glancing over my shoulder, he was still there, watching me. I felt a knot in my stomach. Something was wrong. I walked faster, glancing back several more times. Each time, he was still standing there, his gaze fixed on me. It wasn't until I was out of the park and on my way home that I realized he'd followed me at a distance, but he was there. That night, I got a text from Ben. "I saw you today. You looked scared. I liked that." My hands went cold, and I felt the blood drain from my face. It felt like he was toying with me. I tried to ignore it, to pretend nothing was happening, but the fear lingered. Over the next few days, I started noticing little things, things that made me feel paranoid. My things moved around in my room. My door, which was always locked, was slightly ajar when I came home. And then there were the whispers in the hallway at night that sounded like someone was just outside my door. The worst part was when I found a note. It was on my desk, tucked under a book. I had no idea how it got there. The handwriting was messy. I'm closer than you think. You'll never escape me. I didn't know what to do. Ben had been showing up in places I never told him I'd be, and he always seemed to know exactly where I was. But when I confronted him, he just laughed. You're paranoid, he said with a smile too wide. I just want to be friends. But I didn't believe him anymore. Something in his eyes, something in the way he spoke made it clear that he wasn't my friend. He was obsessed. That was when I realized the truth. Ben wasn't stalking me out of interest. He had been watching me because he wanted control. He wanted to know everything about me, where I went, who I was with, what I did. He thrived on the fear, the uncertainty, and no matter how much I tried to distance myself, he always found a way back into my life. I eventually had to move to a different town, change my number, and delete my social media. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. I haven't heard from him in a while, and I've tried to forget. I've been friends with Sam since elementary school. We were inseparable, two sides of the same coin. He was charismatic and always the life of the group. Everyone loved him. I trusted him like a brother, never once questioning his intentions. But that all changed one night when I found out who Sam really was. It started subtly at first, little things that didn't seem too out of the ordinary but added up over time. Sam would make odd comments about people he didn't like, saying things like, if they disappeared, no one would even care. Or he would talk about how easy it would be to get away with things, like theft or worse. I laughed it off, thinking Sam was just being his usual over-the-top self, but something in the back of my mind started to bother me. Then came the night that everything changed. We were at a party, a few drinks in, just having fun with our friend group. The party was at someone's house near the woods, one of those secluded places where people go to get away from the world. Sam had been acting strange all night, withdrawn, quieter than usual. He kept looking at people in the room with an unsettling intensity. His eyes were cold. At one point, I saw him talking to Emily, a girl from our class. She seemed uncomfortable, like she didn't know how to get out of the conversation. I thought I would step in and break it up, but before I could get close, Sam's tone shifted. His voice was low and oddly calm. I couldn't hear the words, but Emily's face turned pale. I watched her back away, visibly shaken. She muttered something to a few of us before she left the party. I found Sam in the kitchen pouring himself another drink. I asked him what that was about, why Emily looked so upset. Sam's smile was eerie, almost smug. She just didn't get the joke, he said casually. But I saw something in his eyes, a darkness that I've never noticed before. I let it slide, but that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A few days later, I found out the truth. I ran into her best friend, Lauren, who told me that Emily had gone missing, just vanished. No one had seen her since that night. The police were involved, but there were no leads. I didn't think Sam had anything to do with it, not at first, but the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't ignore the growing suspicion. The way Sam had been acting after the party, how he always seemed to be watching people when they weren't looking, how he would casually talk about things that made my skin crawl. I decided to confront him, hoping that I was just being paranoid. I invited him over to my place, trying to keep things casual. But the second he walked in, I felt it, an overwhelming sense of dread. There was a coldness about him, like he wasn't the Sam I'd known for years. We sat down, and I asked him about Emily. His expression never faltered, but his eyes, they looked different. He didn't seem the least bit worried or surprised that she was missing. He just stared at me for a long moment before speaking. "Don't worry about her," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "She's fine. I'll make sure she's fine. Just like I always make sure things work out for us." It took me a moment to process what he was saying, but when the realization hit me, my stomach dropped. I knew deep down Sam wasn't the person I thought he was. Before I could say anything, Sam stood up, his face shifting into something darker. He was no longer the friend I knew, but someone else entirely. He moved towards me, his steps slow and deliberate. "You always were a little too curious, weren't you? But that's okay. You'll learn to keep your mouth shut. It's what friends do." Suddenly, I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move as he towered over me. I was trapped in my own home, staring at the face of someone I thought I knew. The Sam I had trusted wasn't real. He was something else, something far darker. Luckily, I was able to escape him that night. He finally left, and I breathed a sigh of relief. That was the last time I saw Sam. It's been years now, and I've kept my distance from anyone who reminds me of Sam. I still hear his voice in my nightmares, and my only memory of him was his eyes in the last few weeks that I knew him. I don't know what happened to Emily. I don't know if Sam was responsible or if he's still out there, hiding in plain sight. But I know one thing for sure. Sam wasn't the person I thought he was. He wasn't my friend. He was evil. And if you ever meet someone like Sam, trust me, stay far, far away. So this started on one of those meet new friends apps. I'm not just a huge loser, I swear. I moved to my current city during the pandemic and have a work from home position, so it just hasn't been the prime circumstances for a social life. I matched with this random girl. We'll call her Annie. I can't remember if I saw her first or vice versa. Honestly, I was paying more attention to the profiles than the pictures, and she seemed okay. Spirituality came up somehow. I can't remember how this happened either, and to be fair, it could have been either of us. I had recently been more seriously following Norse paganism, but it wasn't something I was seeking to explore with other people. It was mostly a private thing. Not to mention, my own beliefs are more metaphorical. But that doesn't mean I'm close to the experience entirely. So when she mentioned having a LGBTQ neurodivergent pagan femme coven, I was like, okay, wow, that's either very specific or very broad. But hey, why not? Maybe it would be fun. So we agreed to meet first before I went to the event. One weird thing that stuck out in our text conversations was that our partner was in some sort of bizarre Scientology rehab. At first, I assumed it was a place where one recovers from Scientology, but I did ask her if her partner was a Scientologist. I didn't get an answer. We only met for an hour to have coffee. I think more red flags would have popped up if we had more time, because the little things that went off my radar were things that weren't that weird. Like there were more explanations, or I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, and my dumbass didn't ask about the Scientology thing. I kept meaning to Google Scientology rehab, but kept forgetting to do it. I have since Googled it and cannot find anything about the rehab for ex-Scientologists, so I wish I would have done that sooner. There were, however, other things that stuck out. They're relatively benign out of context, but putting everything together in retrospect made me feel dumb. She wouldn't answer any direct questions about herself, and not for lack of asking. I'm the kind of person who is conscious of when the attention is all on me, so it made me uncomfortable, and I didn't learn anything about her really. Most of what she said had to do with her spiritual awakening. Her spiritual awakening itself sounded weird as fuck. She said she was like a lighthouse, drawing people towards their personal enlightenment. And okay, I did think that was weird, but like, she was from California. I don't know, maybe that's normal. I just chalked it up to her personal beliefs being whatever they were. Reincarnation was a big part of paganism. She told me she didn't think she had any past lives and is a new soul, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but okay, whatever, not my circus, not my monkeys. The vaguely supernatural element she placed on herself was strange, but I knew a lot of people that wanted to feel special. That didn't mean I had to believe it. At one point, I told her about this random woman I met at the pagan festival who tried to con me. She wanted to charge me so I could be under her wing or whatever. I don't need someone to protect me or guide me, so I declined. As I was telling this story, I could tell that Annie was conflicted, like she wanted to agree but didn't. Finally, she said something, like how it was only inappropriate because the student should choose the teacher. So I clarified that I didn't want a teacher. Her responses were very mirroring, and I'm not a moron. I was getting a weird sense that she wasn't being honest with me, that she was telling me things I wanted to hear, so I told myself she was probably just nervous. I had a strong personality. I'm very independent, so I can understand why someone wouldn't want to go up against things I said in our very first meeting. I know I'm just dumb at this point, but I didn't want to be paranoid. I don't trust people easily, and I know that, so I was just trying to loosen up and be more chill. Yeah, big mistake. So I go to this thing. Immediately, it's weird. The second I step foot in that house, I'm uncomfortable. It's filled with people and completely silent. Everyone is looking at me. I'm laughing and saying hi, and no one is really responding. And here I am awkwardly dropping my keys and phone while everyone is just watching me. Eventually, I take a seat on the short couch because there's no room on the large circle. It's a very small living room and there's 20 people circled up. There's a cushion on the couch, so I sit on that. The leader starts talking, and as she's going on, I'm looking around at the people there. I was curious. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the leader trying to look at me. The girl sitting in front of me was partially blocking our view of each other. So the leader is leaning over and trying to meet my gaze. Finally, I felt awkward enough to shift over, so I was leaning against the arm of the chair. Staying perched on that fucking cushion was uncomfortable by this point, so I shifted off and spread out a bit to be more comfortable. The leader ended their speech with, "So spread out, I guess," which was clearly directed to me. It was said with some humor though, so I wasn't sure what to make of it. Everyone introduces themselves and their unique brand of neurodivergent. I'm ADHD, but I guess I don't subscribe to labels beyond the requirement to stay medicated. I've been medicated since 2015, so this isn't a new diagnosis for me. That was the only question we got asked about ourselves, beyond our name. The leader guides us through meditation, and people are making these weird breathing sounds and hums. I get it, it's spiritual, right? Unfortunately, my ADHD can't focus to save my life, and it's impossible for me to follow a guided meditation, so I'm sitting there with my eyes closed and barely paying attention, because I can't. But I do hear the leader say we should think of anything we would like to ask her or need from her, and that got my attention. What the fuck did I need to ask her, other than where the snacks were, because I paid $8 and I don't see a single snack. Once the meditation ended, Annie and the leader walked around and gave us material for an activity. Annie gave me 2 long pieces of twine, and the leader gave me 2 sticks. As the leader was handing out the sticks, I asked her where the snacks were. She was like, "In the kitchen, on the table, where snacks tend to be." I'm a dry, sarcastic person, so I thought this was her brand of humor. I laughed and played along. "Alright, I think I'll find them." She literally was deadpan, unsmiling. And then walked away. So stupid me thought she just might be like that. But then I saw her laughing with the other girls and realized something was off. As the activity commenced, she went back over to Annie and started stroking her back, kissing her hair, and giving me this creepy smile. Yeah, it was weird. I was so uncomfortable. I wanted to get up and go, but I couldn't. Why? Because of this damn activity. The activity was the last straw. They wanted us to think of something we wanted to discard that brought us pain. Then they wanted us to feel how bad this thing made us feel as we slowly twisted a piece of twine around a stick. That's shit that I would only do with a therapist. Obviously, people were emotionally melting down before long. I wasn't comfortable doing this activity for obvious reasons, so I sat there awkwardly with the sticks and the string in my lap. I was the only one not doing it, and it was obvious. But because I wasn't doing it, I had the opportunity to watch Annie and the leader, and it was chilling. Annie was doing some weird pyramid thing above her head with her arms. There were a lot of references to her being a lighthouse or some sort of guiding figure throughout the meeting. She was the only one that wasn't doing the ritual, other than the leader. They were both running it. Suddenly it occurred to me, as it probably did to y'all already, that Annie had been using the app just to bring people into their group. She was the only person who seemed to know everyone, yet no one knew each other. Even the name of their group made sense now. They weren't being specific, they were casting a wide net. And I had this big realization in a handful of seconds. It made my stomach turn. So yeah, I was done, but I couldn't get up because people were sharing their experiences and shit, pouring their hearts out. This was the most fucked up part of it, in my opinion. There's no reason to do a releasing ceremony that forces people to feel their trauma, especially at the very first meeting. It was inherently manipulative, but it requires people to let their guard down. Then they can save the day by showing people how they released the very same pain they just inflicted. But that isn't the fault of the people there, so I didn't want to disrespect them. Like, people were sobbing on top of my shoes that I left by the door. I had to wait for the best time to ask someone to pass them to me. Finally, I got up and told everyone that I had to go to my car, then took off. I texted Annie and told her I wouldn't be back, and that I hoped she found her people. Just make sure you're not her people. Be really careful of any spiritual ceremonies or practices that demands vulnerability from you, especially directed by people that don't know you beyond your name. Annie, let's not meet under any circumstances ever again.